Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 70 of Paranormal NL Podcast on Spotify. I'm your host, Jen. Paranormal NL Podcast is a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. PNL Podcast believes in supporting people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal networking all over the world. A big thank you again to all the PNL alumni guests from Season 1 and 2, and of course our fans. We want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, supernatural, metaphysical, witchy, alchemist, unexplained ghosts, cryptid creatures, folklore, historical, or tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my PNL podcast? Reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail. After your episode, you'll become part of the PNL Podcast Alumni Network. Don't forget, you can also watch and listen with your smart TV for free on the Spotify app. Make sure you click on that Spotify bell to get updates of new episodes. Head on over to Facebook and join us on my Facebook group called Paranormal NL Podcast. You can find upcoming new podcast episodes there in the featured section of the group. We're listening to our fans. PNL Podcast merch is available on TeePublic. PNL Podcast is also now on Instagram and coming soon on YouTube too. PNL will be switching to a new recording platform June the 1st, either Riverside or StreamYard. Stay tuned. Now, let's get on with the show. Tonight, I have on the line with me from Indiana, USA, Alan and Kim Bishop. He's the Hooser Alchemist, and she's the witchy wife making spirits and magic together. Welcome, Alan and Kim.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being on the show tonight. So how's the weather down in Indiana?
Today it's beautiful. On either side of us, we have rain, though, for the last, month.
Oh, no. Can you believe in Labrador, up north of us, like Newfoundland and Labrador, they actually had snow today and a delayed opening for snow.
Oh, my goodness.
But on the flip side, we got 20 degrees, so it was nice. So let's go on to you guys. Tell us more about, you got a lot of stuff on your plate. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I'm a distiller for a living, and have been now for 10 years. I've been a home distiller / moonshiner for a long time before that, and I've always been, interested in the esoteric and the occult and spirituality of all types, and always had all kinds of strange experiences that seem to find me or I wander myself into on accident, and seem to be able to trigger those from time to time. Very interested in, obviously, the links between alchemy, both physical and spiritual alchemy, and what I do for a living, and try to wrap that very much so into all of the pursuits that I'm into, whether it be, distilling professionally or making tinctures or farming or gardening or writing. All those things are all interrelated. History, music, those are all sort of the crossroads where I come from and what I'm very much into. And I consider myself a storyteller, and that was sort of the genesis for the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast, not only to tell the stories that Kim and I had, or that I had, or that she had herself, but also, to find interesting stories to narrate and or to find interesting people to interview and talk about any of those topics, any of the high strangeness of 4TN, the cryptids, but also just spirituality in general, just sitting down with somebody who I might not even otherwise agree with at all in any way, shape, or form about their spirituality, and have a conversation, about, how they see God or how they see whatever they see, just to present that to the world. I think there's a lot of value in that.
I love that. You've got a well-rounded, you got everything. You definitely have everything. If you have ghosts, you have everything. Well, you definitely got it all. Kim, do you want to jump in and give a blurb about your stuff?
I mean, I'm a stay-at-home mom and I guess pagan practitioner, interested in any and all things paranormal, and general chaos wrangler, because, you know, we've got Alan's schedule and our daughter's schedule, and so they just call me the chaos coordinator.
Now, Alan, didn't you just start a new job with the Old Homestead Distilling?
Yeah, so that's a distillery that I've been consulting for. You know, they haven't opened up yet, but I've been consulting on this project for about 4.5 years now, and got the invite to come work over there and have a little equity in the situation, and complete creative control, essentially, of what I'm distilling and what I'm making, the stories and that sort of stuff. And so it was too good to pass up, and it's a really cool operation because it's owned by a group of people who they have several interests around Patoka Lake, which is the second largest lake in the state of Indiana. You know, the largest campground in the state of Indiana. All kinds of fishing and that sort of stuff. But they own the marina there. They own floating cabins. They own party boats. They own the gas station over there. They own a winery. There's a brewery there that we don't own, but we own the building, and you know, we work with them closely, Patoka Lake Brewing. And then we built the distillery with a 28-room hotel and a walk-in humidor. So, you know, it's a lake setting, so it's fun for the whole family, but it's fun for the whole family with the option for alcohol if you would like it.
That sounds
make
fun.
It tolerable for the whole family.
Yeah, make it tolerable. Yes.
Right. You got a lot of stuff.
It's a really neat place, and I'm it's the first opportunity in the legal industry where I've actually been somewhat in control of my own destiny, as it were, and I can do some of the things that I've always wanted to do in a commercial setting, but I didn't have the equipment to do elsewhere, didn't have the levity to do elsewhere. I wasn't comfortable necessarily sharing the information I had on all the subjects that I had elsewhere.
So now
it's the first time we felt at home in a setting too.
Yes.
Yeah, you have a lot of instruments now and things at your hands that you can do. Have you tried any new things, ingredients or techniques?
Well, I've always kept notes of all the things that I thought were worthwhile from my home distilling days. I'm always constantly experimenting and playing around, capturing different yeast strains, wild yeast and cultivated yeast both, and using odd ingredients. You know, we grow a huge garden, and for several years I was involved in pretty intensive plant breeding for medicine and edibles both. So there are reams and reams of books of projects that will finally get to be implemented in some manner, way, shape, or form that I think are going to be pretty eye-opening to what the world of distilled spirits can be on a regional basis, in terms of, you know, things that people have never seen before, never tried before, never experienced before, or if they have, they've not been done to an elevated level. Things such as, you know, Americanized absinthe, like real absinthe, based upon, you know, the history of absinthe with the Henriot sisters and the Val de Travers all the way up through the Belle Epoque, and being able to actually take that spirit and sort of put an American spin on it, but still stay true to the roots. So
nice. So you talked about books. You're on Amazon too, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. So I do a little writing here and there. I've got two mainline books. I don't know. I guess I call them mainline books. So they're the Alchemist Cabinet Philosophy Volume 1 and the Black Forest Method, which is Volume 2, and those are all distillation based, distillation informed. The first one's sort of autobiographical with a bunch of information about early stuff I did in distilling and how to do it, and then the Black Forest Method is sort of a book of recipes as much of anything, of very complex distillations that people can do at home if they really want to step up their game, if they're interested in home distilling, as that's become a huge hobby of a lot of people, regardless of the legality of it or illegality of it, depending on where you're at. And then the third one is the Almanac, the Distiller's Almanac, and that's a thing that I'm doing every year now. So it's like a farmer's almanac for distillers or people who are interested in distilling. It's not necessarily just distilling related information. It's also sort of operates as, I kind of call it a clearinghouse for things that I write down in my own grimoire that I think might be useful to other people, or folklore that might be interesting to other people, or I think there was an article in this one that I did about maple syrup and tapping maple trees, that sort of stuff. But it'll certainly be something that I pursue every year from here on out, because when I started looking into it, I thought for sure that somebody would have had to have done like a distiller's almanac or brewer's almanac at some point. But not only had they not, but when I went back through a lot of the vintage almanacs that have been released throughout the world, they're really, at least in the U.S. and the various different almanacs that have come out here since the 1600s, there was really no distilling information that I came across in any of those almanacs, which kind of surprised me.
Wow, I love almanacs. They're so fun. Like you said, there's all kinds of interesting stuff in there. And I see you've got other things here, the Alchemist cabinet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of the main website where you can find all the little things that we do. So, we've done a documentary about distilling called The Alan Bishop Experience, and there's, of course, the books there. There's links to my old blog, which I don't really keep up with too much anymore, but there's a lot of historical information. I do a lot of research on old distilleries here in southern Indiana from pre-Prohibition, so a lot of that information is on there. We've done we're working on a documentary about distilling in the state of Indiana right now with the IU film team that we've been working on for a few years. And then I've done, I do a lot of lecturing about distilling or about alchemy or about some combination of the two plus Magick. And so we filmed a lecture I did about the history of distilling in southern Indiana. So there's DVDs of that on there.
General merchandise.
Yeah, general merchandise. Yeah, right. Send us money.
We've been known to do like grain packages with the yeast and the different grains and whatever, and instructions to do that. We don't have any of that in stock right now because obviously we're just coming into season and we don't have fresh grains available at this moment. And we'll see how things work out with the distillery, and once it gets up running, the timetable that we have available to do that.
Over time, we may offer some seeds and stuff like that on there too for varieties of plants that are not only good for, edible use or for medicinal use, but also potentially for distillation as well. Because that's one of my other big passions. We kind of have a physics garden surrounding the house in terms of different plants that are useful for tincturing and or useful in things such as absinthe or aquavit or eau de vie, or not eau de vie, I'm sorry, gin, etc. So we might start offering some of that stuff in time. But it's just kind of a good place to sort of keep up with a general overview of what I have going on, mostly. So.
And Kim, you've got your own stuff too. I see you've got your Witch's Brew boutique on ETSY. Etsy.
Yeah, I've not kept up with Etsy for a while. I do some wire wrapping of crystals. I haven't done it in a minute, but I'm getting back into it. There was a period there for a couple of years where I was helping take care of my mom. She got sick and all of that, and that kind of just fell the wayside. I do tarot readings on the regular, and you can find that specifically on Facebook through my Facebook page. But yeah, tarot's kind of where I'm at right now with all of that.
Just a little cleaning rituals and stuff like that as well, for people from time to time, and then we do birth charts from time to time and stuff like that. When we have time with this new job, it's been pretty. Yeah. She comes over and helps me out with that some too, so it's been pretty tight time wise the past few weeks for sure, and with travel, because I just did a veterans event here out in Pennsylvania. To raise money for the 250th anniversary of the United States to go to armed services.
Yeah, armed forces.
Armed forces. Anyway. Yeah. So it's been a crazy couple weeks.
That's great that you did that. So congrats on that for doing that veterans event.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun, and I think those guys they really appreciate it. We did it out at Stolen Wolf Distillery, which is a distillery I collaborate with quite often. And, it was a very small event. We invited 20 people. You had to be sort of invited to it to come. But it was cool because I would say out of the 20, a full half of them were home distillers. Some of them were probably more like what you would call moonshiners. But, all of them, the ones that were already distilling, talked about how distilling was sort of a therapy for them after getting out of the armed services and the others were very interested in distilling for the same reasons. And I think that speaks to the spirituality that's sort of inherent in the lifestyle of distillation that Kim and I live. So,
yeah, did you want to talk about any of your things from the podcast or anything witchy or alchemy or anything along that sorts, paranormal?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kim just went to close the gate. She'll be right back, but I'm sure she'll want to talk too. But I'll kind of give people an overview of the idea of alchemy as a spiritual thing when it comes to the distillation of spirits. Because I think it's sort of an interesting topic that people sort of miss out on when they just look at the all the bright shiny squirrely copper of all the big distilleries, as opposed to the way a craft distiller might view things. But so essentially, distillation traces its roots back to really pre-alchemy. The earliest distillations that we know of for sure happening, other than in China, were all related to the Bacchic cults, to the Dionysic cults, and it was very much a regulated sort of thing. Like, if you knew how to do this, you knew how to create not only alcohol but essential oils, various flammable materials, etc. If you could make this clear water, this eau de vie, aqua vitae, water of life, that was clear, looked just like water, but could be set on fire. That's sort of an interesting parlor trick to get people to sort of believe in your God. And of course, there are links between Bacchus / Dionysus and Jesus as well. They're very similar. I don't want to use the word mythology because I don't want to offend anybody on either side of that equation, but for lack of any better word, they are very similar mythologically, all the way down to the wine as the blood, and certain ceremonies that were ritualistically carried out with distilling the blood of Dionysus, the grape wine, into this aqua vitae in order to create what was called a baptism by fire, which is a kind of interesting account whereby you would take someone who wanted to join into these Bacchic rites and had really put the time and the effort in to learn, and you would anoint them with this alcohol that had been treated with sulfur at about 30 proof and pour it over them. And at 30 proof and with sulfur added to it, it will burn, but it won't burn anything. So you could pour it over the head of an initiate, light it on fire, and the entire person would be consumed by fire, but they would not burn at all in any way, shape, or form. And what a kind of miraculous thing that is in general. They sort of lifted the still up as this interesting mechanism for creating a substance that could break through the veil, could change, the mind of man, as they did many substances over time, for positive or for negative, depending on how the person went into it mentally, how stable they were, how much they drank, if they over imbibed or not. But, a bit of a social lubricant, something to make you feel a little better about yourself, feel better about interacting with other people, or even to let go of your inhibitions. And from there, it was very much so passed in through these mystery schools as a rite, as a form of alchemy, all the way down through, Maria the Jewess there in Alexandria, Egypt, who may or may not be also the same historical character that people know as Mary Magdalene. There seems to be a bit of evidence there that might be one and the same. Of course, from there it gets, handed down through the ages, through the various famous alchemists. It gets lost in Europe for a while, but the Arabs hold on to it. When it gets to Europe, even though it seems lost during the Dark Ages, there are certainly groups of people who understand the importance of this art and various other alchemical arts, and they do hold on to it. They just keep it hidden from the rest of us as far as that goes. But you end up seeing the Templars sort of rediscover it. It follows that it ends up then in Spain, travels to France, ends up in the British Isles, and then does this really interesting thing where you sort of have these two different spiritual cultures meeting one another once you get to the British Isles, which is you have the trained monks distilling, basically a stone beer in the British Isles for various medicaments and or for, ceremonial use via the Gaels. And then the Gauls who are there, the Norse who are there, they see the Gaels. By the way, that word Gaul is interesting. It actually means those other people, those red-haired people is what Gaul means. But they see that they're just taking the same stone beer, the same Groot, the same Geist that they're using, and running it through the still to create this amazingly potent potential medicine or relaxant. And you can tie all the spiritual aspects of alchemy into distillation. I mean, the history of distillation is the history of alchemy, is the history of chemistry. They're all interrelated. But all the way down to the mechanism of a still, the boiler is the realm that we would call earth. As you hit that with fire, you go through the blackening process. It turns into vapor and it rises into the heavens. Some of it's not pure enough; it falls back down. It refluxes and it's made more pure as it does. As such, it comes across a line arm, which is sort of traveling through the other side, through the veil. And then it hits a condenser, it condenses back down into a liquid and comes off the still as a much more potent product that's been purified of the gross substance of this world. And so there's a lot of metaphor in just the actual action of distillation on a very basic level. And I think it's why people are very interested in the art of distillation. They may not know exactly why, because they don't know those sort of esoteric principles, but those things are ingrained in all of us. And the other thing with that is it seems, alcohol is a very easily charged substance. It's a liquid crystal. It's charged with whatever energies the creator at that time is putting into it. It's charged with the very spirit, the very essence of whatever you're distilling. The idea of, taking an apple that was ripe in September and tasted beautiful and was wonderfully aromatic, and being able to preserve that so that you can experience that exact sensory moment in the middle of January, when there are no apples around. That's a pretty magical sort of thing. And that apple gave its essence, its very being to the distillation process. So nonetheless, I think the other thing that happens is, we get into a lot of haunted distillery stories, things of that nature. Spirits, good and bad, outside of distilled spirits, like to associate with distilled spirits. They like to connect themselves to those distilled spirits. And they see, in my opinion, they see that as an easy way to enter people, either in a positive or a negative way, depending on what you're sort of asking for and what you're doing at the time.
Yeah, I was doing an episode one time, and we were talking about that, how, when people seem to be in a weaker state. It was with Siskel Murdoch, actually. I'm not sure if you've been on her podcast, Through the Gate, the Paranormal Portal podcast, but her and Steve. And she talked about that, how they can jump into different people when they're imbibing or, drinking. So, and I think it's interesting how you put the history into it. I love that, because it is very historical and it goes back down as far as we can remember.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the other things I'll throw in here too that I failed to mention is one of the things that I have a habit of doing, because I'm such a history nerd. It's a very practical form of magic. It's almost a form of necromancy in one way, shape, form, or the other. But I love to, when I conceptualize the making of a spirit, I conceptualize not only what it's going to taste and smell like, what the raw materials are, but I have to have either a person or a place or an ideal that goes along with that. And I like to pick people who, for one reason or another, have been left out of mainstream history in the local history books, people who maybe were not in the right political party at the time, people who maybe had, a shady job or whatever. And I like to conceptualize, what would that spirit taste like in terms of how do you represent those people? And then you can tell their story. And it's an interesting thing, because you can take people that, not only no one here locally knows about from 120, 130 years ago, put their picture on a bottle and tell their story, and then the local people know about them. But then when you get into distribution into other states, other countries, all of a sudden these people, their names are showing up and their stories are showing up in places like New Orleans or Key West, or in Texas was actually a pretty big market for me at my last distillery. So you're breathing life into these people. And the interesting thing is, I feel like quite often, and Kim can verify this, because there's one spirit in particular that I've worked with many times. I'll go through the process of naming one, coming up with a spirit for it, etc. And then it's like I get tapped on the shoulder, and the spirits are like, "Hey, here's this other person over here you should probably talk to." And it'll start with a tidbit of historic information. Won't be able to find anything else, and all of a sudden the rabbit hole just opens up, and it's just the flood walls are open, floodgates are open at that point.
Wow, that's really interesting. Now, have you thought about doing anybody from over here in Canada with our nice iceberg water?
Yeah, so you guys have got some cool stuff going on over there, and I actually I had a distributor at my previous place that we use there in Canada, and I'm hoping to use them at the new place. We actually, one of the guys that does reviews for him is a big time into the esoteric and the occult and horror movies, and just does some amazing reviews of whiskey with horror movies, which is fantastic. And he did that for us. I'm a big Canada fan, by the way, in terms of so Rush is my favorite band of all time, and Dan Aykroyd's my favorite actor of all time. So, you know, I will even be the first to admit that I ripped Dan Aykroyd off a little bit. We you know, he does the Crystal Skull vodka thing with the Herkimer Diamonds. So we did a Fascination Street absinthe named after the Cure song, and we filtered that through amethyst because why not?
That's fun. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you're definitely.
And Trailer Park Boys. I love Trailer Park Boys with a passion.
Oh yeah, they're funny too. You're gonna have to check out some of our local Newfoundland stuff. I think you get a kick out of it, and all the different tastes that we got going on here for sure. We're a bit of a weird crew over here. We're very Irish, and sometimes, well, our flag is very similar to the Irish flag, so sometimes you might see that on my Facebook page. So we're very different than the rest of Canada. So yeah.
Well, if you ever have any connections to any of the distillers up that way, whether they're home distillers or legal distillers, I would gladly put them on the Distillers Talk podcast that I do with Christy Atkinson, because I get dorky about spirits, and I'll go as dorky as they want to get.
Well, we even had we had this thing here called Fogfest, and on my logo you see the Kraken, because here in Newfoundland and Labrador we have had Krakens here, and well, Shane Mills is horror, all things horror here in Newfoundland and Labrador. You have to look him up, and he's in charge of the Fogfest. So they even made their own beer for the Fogfest, and it had a Kraken on the outside of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's one of our dreams at Old Homestead, or one of my dreams, and they all seem to be interested in it. It's Eric from Uncomfortable, of course. He's doing, you know, his Paranormal Fest, and we were trying to get him in there, and I don't know where that's gotten to yet. But I will, at some point in the next 2 years, have a paranormal conference at that hotel and distillery, because I am obsessed with the idea of it. We're in the middle of the Hoosier National Forestry. There's 1,000,001 ghost stories, 1,000,001 Bigfoot stories, and Dogman stories. And flooded multiple cemeteries, yes. So yeah, I'm determined that eventually in like November of the year, sometime, November or January, one of the two, we're going to have a big paranormal conference and get a bunch of podcasters in there and do that, because it'd be great to be able to make a spirit for that, you know?
Oh, that sounds so fun. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Alan and Kim Bishop in Indiana. Hello, folks. Welcome back again. We've got Alan and Kim Bishop here from Indiana. I think Kim is on here now. Hi, Kim.
Yeah, I am. Hi, how are you?
How are you doing? Witchy Woman? That's your nickname, right?
Yeah. yeah.
Tell me more about what you do, Kim.
So with the podcast, I mainly, I've partnered with JJ and Jayce, and we do like kind of practical magical discussions on the podcast, like what to do, what not to do, or even practical at-home rituals that are like not rituals, you know, because not everything has to be elaborate in circles and dancing around under the moonlight.
Yes, I know. We can do rocks and crystals and sage and all kinds of cool stuff. Tell us more.
So, like this most recent episode that we recorded, we talked about like practical, like at home, everyday things that you might do. Like when you're cleaning your house a certain way, you can imbibe or set your intentions as you're going of, I'm not just cleaning my house to clean it, I'm cleaning it spiritually as well. I'm removing any negative energies, emotions, etc. And you can do that a certain way by, just basically putting that thought out there, because everything is a thought form. And intention is everything in magic. Or as simple as when you're cleaning your mirrors in your house, you can clean them one way to clean them physically, and another way to lock them spiritually so things can't come through from the other side.
Now, I like that thing that you talked about with the mirrors, because I've had several different people on, several different episodes, and we've been talking about things coming through the mirrors. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how to lock it?
Sure, we can do that. So what I do, and again, it's all very simple because I've got an 8-year-old and 2 dogs and a bazillion chickens, so I don't have time to be elaborate with everything. So a couple of times a month, I will actually deeply, spiritually smoke cleanse, sound cleanse the house. But in the interim time, when things get a little bit murky and, you feel like things might be watching you, that's when I go through and start locking mirrors, because we have lots of mirrors in our house. Our house is tiny, and Alan's grandpa actually built it from 2 army barracks. So, like, in our bathroom, there's 3 mirrors in the bathroom, and it's like a trifecta of crazy. And you never really want 2 mirrors facing each other, because then that just creates a portal. So what I do is I go through, and when I'm physically cleaning the mirror, I'll use whatever cleaner I'm using. And when I'm wiping it clockwise, just to clean it. Now, when I want to spiritually cleanse it, I will use the same cleaner, but I'll go counterclockwise, and that is closing the door and wiping away, because when you're wanting to banish things or push things away, you go counterclockwise. And I think to myself, this door is closed, nothing that has ill intentions can come through. And then I will take like an essential oil. My favorite to use is Palo Santo oil. And I just put an algae's room on the mirror in the top corner where it's not going to mess with us being able to get ready or whatever. And I will do that with every mirror in the house. Now, Alan has a scrying mirror that he closes, and I let him do that. I don't mess with that. But I do the one in our daughter's room, I do the one in our bedroom, and all the ones in the bathroom. And if it's feeling like particularly weird, like in October when the veil is thin, I will do the same thing with the windows, because our property is very spiritually charged, because we have train tracks that run right through the middle of it. And there's a portion of the property that is very, very active, and there's a trickster back there that likes to pick on us. So when in October, I will do the exact same thing with the windows too, so that nothing from the outside can come in the house.
Okay, that makes sense for sure. So you guys do scrying too?
Alan does. I don't do scrying.
Okay. Yes, yeah, occasionally I do. Not as much as I might like to. Just for lack of having a chance to sit down and focus on that sort of thing, especially with doing tarot and runes and astrology and all that stuff on top of it. But yeah, I do a little bit of scrying and would like to get a little more into that over time for sure.
Yeah, I've had somebody on the show before had something weird come up when he was scrying, sent me a picture of it. But yeah, there's been a lot of different things around, even like downtown, and a lot of the different old bars and stuff. Have many people talk to you about haunted bars?
So we did have the one that I do know of that we've talked about, not on if you have Ghost, but on Distillers Talk. We had the old Absinthe Bar in New Orleans, which of course Hemingway was there, Crowley was there at one point in time. They definitely have had some strange things happen there, which it's New Orleans, so you kind of expect it. I've got a few stories from. I haven't done anything with them yet, but I've got a few stories from Key West. For sure. I think Key West is one of those places that people don't realize. Key West is what New Orleans kind of used to be, And there's a lot of crazy history in Key West, and I'd like to get a little deeper into that at some point for sure, because I've got some really cool stories from there.
I didn't know that about Key West. I had no idea.
It's a very strange place. So even when Key West was found, when the island was originally found, but well, not found, but when the first Europeans got there, there were bones all over the beaches, just scattered about the beaches, human bones everywhere, and there's still no real explanation of that. You got to remember when you're in Key West, you're right there on the edge of the Caribbean. You're dealing a lot with hoodoo and voodoo culture as well. A lot of Native American culture there too. Plus, you're dealing with people, maybe not, I guess, sort of the oddities of society that have come to Key West over the years to escape everything else. I always joke that Key West is where you go when you want to just go watch the world die. Just have a few drinks and watch everybody else mess their life up, sort of thing. But Hemingway lived there for several years as well. So, yeah, lots of strange history there. Robert the Doll is there. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert the Doll, but I got to go see Robert the Doll, which was a doll that was made by an enslaved African American lady and given to a captain's son, I believe it was. Maybe not with the best intentions, and it's certainly a creepy feeling around that.
You can't take this picture without asking permission.
Yeah, you have to ask permission. Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I didn't hear of that one, Robert the Doll. I knew about Hemingway and his 6-toed kitties.
Yep. There's still a bunch of polydactyls running around there. There's also, Hemingway was a lover of absinthe, and I don't suspect that he ever made any in his life, but there's definitely grand wormwood growing in the backyard of that little estate house there for sure.
So that's what's in it, is it? Grand wormwood?
Yep, grand wormwood. That's the primary ingredient.
Okay. And does that like hallucinogenic stuff? Or I've heard a lot of people say absinthe can really throw you for a loop even more than tequila.
It's not so much that it's hallucinogenic. It's very high concentrated alcohol.
Well, that's not what caused that, though. What caused all of that was an entirely different thing.
Right.
So there's a compound in grand wormwood that's called alpha-thujone, and it's not a hallucinogen. It's actually a liver toxin in high doses. But what more or less happened was absinthe became incredibly popular in the 1860s in France because it had been issued to the French League when they were in Egypt because the water was unsafe to drink. So they developed this real taste for it. And of course, much like the beatnik poets inspired the hippies here in the United States, the French League sort of inspired the what's the word I'm looking for? There's a French word I can't think of, but like the fancy people, right? Like whatever. Anyways, to partake in absinthe. But the other thing that happened was that phylloxera came in and wiped out the grape industry in France, and of course in France, they would have basically happy hour with red wine or white wine either way. And when phylloxera wiped out the wine grapes, they needed a substitute. So absinthe was the easy substitute for that because you would pour the absinthe at 140 proof, but you would add water to it and drop it to about 14% alcohol like a strong wine. The artists loved it because when you're drinking absinthe, you stay lucid. So you're drunk, but it doesn't affect your motor skills in the same way that that other alcohols do, because the various botanicals in there all have various different physiological effects, none of which are hallucination, but sort of this idea of you're drunk, but you know that you're drunk, and it's sort of to an extent controllable to some degree. But what happened was when the wine industry got back up and going in France, they needed a way to get rid of absinthe. And by this time, what had happened was there were a lot of bad absinthe producers that weren't making real absinthe. They were making things with, green liquid colored with a little bit of anise oil, or flavored with anise oil and colored with copper sulfate, which is a heavy metal, right?
Right.
So there were plenty of bad players, but what they needed to do was to have this all-out sort of war against absinthe to ban it. So they came up with this idea that was hallucinogenic. They blamed this farmer in the Swiss Alps They blamed him drinking absinthe on murdering his family and his children because he was hallucinating. What they didn't bother to say was that while he had drank a little bit of absinthe, he had been on a 2-day bender and had drank beer and wine and everything else on top of it. So it was never really hallucinogenic, although it was banned for being hallucinogenic. And what we found out in 2007 with a guy named Ted Bro, who started the Jade Absinthe line and got absinthe sort of re-legalized for everyone, is that there was never enough alpha-thujone in there to cause a problem. You would die of alcohol poisoning long before you ever had any effects of the alpha-thujone. And as an example, sage oil has about 50 times as much alpha-thujone in it as any bottle of absinthe would ever have, but it's completely legal to sell in the store.
That make you wonder, right? Yeah, there's so many different herbs and things that you can use. You must have a lot of fun making up different recipes. I know my dad, when I was growing up, he used to make animal feed, and I'd see him there doing his little recipes, right, for the feed. And I guess it's kind of similar with any kind of thing when you're making up different ingredients, right?
It's very similar, and I love that sort of process-driven stuff like that, productive process-driven stuff. So, you know, we did stuff like that when I was farming full-time as well, or like soil mixes for seed starting. Like, I got obsessed with that for a while. I love those process-oriented things that actually have physiological effects to some degree. I think it's one of the reasons why I love the absinthe thing so much as well, because, you know, while it doesn't cause hallucinations, just to touch on that again real quick, those different botanicals in there, absinthe is, it has so many botanicals in it, it's almost what you'd call a solid state distillation. There's as much solid matter in that still as what there is liquid. And because of that, all those botanicals, and you can think of a few of them, things like anise, you know, which has anethol in it, things like chamomile, we all know the effects of chamomile, licorice root, which is actually a vasorestrictor, so you got to be careful if you have blood pressure problems, but it can restrict your blood flow a bit.
Yes.
Those things are all actually present to some larger or smaller degree as functional ingredients in absinthe, which is a pretty interesting concept if you think about it. It's very much so. The difference between absinthe and all the other botanical spirits in the world is that absinthe really did start off as a tincture in the Swiss Alps. It was created by what we would now consider a coven of witches, or a coven of granny women in the Swiss Alps. And it was there for stomach problems, and it was there for sleep problems.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Just with COVID symptoms. So.
Yeah, you did. It's true. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I said, that makes sense. Yeah. What did you say, Kia?
Yeah.
I said that when we had COVID real bad, absinthe was the only thing I could taste, and it seemed like it shortened the duration of the miserable.
Well, there's been a lot of French research into that as well in recent years. During COVID, they actually they didn't do research directly on absinthe, but they researched various Artemisia family plants, because they knew that there were some antiviral and antimicrobial properties there. And they were studying grand wormwood, annual wormwood, mugwort, and I think they even looked at petite wormwood. I have to go back and look at the papers and see, but this is very much alchemically based sort of research. But they did find that apparently grand wormwood could stop the effects of COVID, could basically stop COVID in its tracks, and we sort of accidentally found that out because I was making quite a bit of absinthe at the time, and I had two friends in the industry that COVID didn't stop them from doing anything. They went to every event that was out there, etc. But they were drinking my absinthe the whole time while they were doing this, and for 2 years, they never once got COVID. And these two people, who I love to death, they are also the same people who will drink after everyone. They'd probably lick a doorknob if you asked them to. But they didn't get COVID the entire time. And then when they ran out of my absinthe, about a week after that, they got COVID.
Oh, no. That's interesting. Have you ever talked to pharmacists about stuff like that?
When I can find them, the problem is finding, actual naturopath, spariagic guys that believe in that sort of stuff, as opposed to the homeopathy, as opposed to the allelopathy. I do have access to a gentleman who's a retired doctor who used to be involved in the business where the new distillery is, and I've had some really interesting conversations with him about botanicals and their uses, and he's very into that whole thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you start using, science. But essentially, that's what you're doing, right? To create different things. It's very interesting. So, folks, you got to follow Alan. You got to follow Kim on all of their socials. I will post up their link tree so you can find all their stuff, and you have to follow them. And I really appreciate y'all being on the show today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. We had a great time, and we'll have to have you on again in the near future.
Let me throw out one more thing real quick for people too. So we talked distillation and spirituality, and we talked absinthe quite a bit, because I always forget things that I've done and things I should promote. So there is a film out there that people can find on a YouTube channel called the Victorian Bar Room. A very good friend of mine, Brian Cushing, and we worked on this film for 4 or 5 years, but it details some absinthe producers in Switzerland County, Indiana, in the 1830s. But I also give the story of the Henriade sisters in that documentary, and sort of the history of absinthe as well. And Indiana is a special state because we actually have in our state a direct descendant of Mare Henriade, the mother of that coven of witches we talked about, who actually lives in this state and has written a couple of great books. Alchemy, was it Elwaz, Alchemy and Absinthe? And then there's the Book of Sicily, which is a follow-up for anyone who's interested in sort of that granny witch magic, a lot of metaphor, not just dealing with absinthe, but obviously absinthe is there.
That's awesome. I wrote that down. Yes, I'll definitely have to put that in the description too for people to find. I don't remember seeing that one on your tree, right?
I don't think it's on there.
Yeah, we did 2 or 3
episodes of the podcast with them, though.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Love that. Oh, well, since we're talking about Indiana, any paranormal tourism you want to throw out there?
Paranormal tourism. Well, here in Washington County, we do have twice a year. In the fall of the year, we have our ghost walk of our largest cemetery in the county. That's put on by...
It's not a ghost walk, it's a history walk.
It's a history walk that tells the stories of the people that are buried there. And they have... it's put on by the Children's Actors Theater, and they portray the persons buried there. And you might pick up a few of the paranormal things that happen along the way there as well. And then in the spring of the year, we have a murder mayhem walk that goes through Washington, through our town center, Salem, and they do talk about all of the murder and mayhem, and you hear the ghost stories there as well too, because people, it always drums up. Somebody says, "Oh yeah, I saw that guy walk through the store the other day."
Well, Southern Indiana is a weird place, and so I say Southern Indiana because a lot of people don't realize this if they're not from here. So if you ask someone from Indiana if they're from Indiana, if they're from Southern Indiana, they will never say I am from Indiana. They will always say I'm from Southern Indiana, because it's culturally, the southern part of the state is quite different than the northern part of the state. But Southern Indiana is a very odd place. It's very connected to some of the legends of Prince Magick. It's very connected to what at one point in time was called the Southern Death Complex, that they now call the Southern Ceremonial Complex, which is an interesting group of indigenous people who probably had, if there weren't Mesoamericans here, they were closely interrelated to Mesoamerican cultures. There's a lot of limestone here. There's a lot of caves here. Subsequently, there's a lot of haunting. There's a lot of UFO sightings. There's a lot of cryptids. It's also, this place is very populated by the region that we're in. We call the Black Forest of Southern Indiana. That's where the Alchemist of the Black Forest comes from. So that was named as such because the people in the 6-county region of Washington, Orange, Lawrence, Crawford, Harrison, and Perry County, the vast majority of them were descendants of Germans from the Black Forest region, and settled here because it looked A, like Pennsylvania, and B, looked like Germany before there. And they brought a lot of that culture and that superstition with them. There's a lot of stories of puckwudgies, the little people, those sort of things here. There's really a lot more to Indiana than just cornfields, for sure. So, but you just got to get, Indiana doesn't do itself any favors. We call it Hoosier self-hatred, and it's the idea that if you were born here, you just automatically grow up thinking, well, nothing cool ever happened here, and nothing cool could ever happen here. It all happens somewhere else, but that's not true.
So Southern Indiana, folks, you got to go check it out. And you also got to go check out Alan and Kim Bishop and follow them on all their socials. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, folks. Stay spooky, my friends.